It was the kind of winter morning that clung to your bones, frost curling at the corners of the window pane, chimney smoke rising in a thin line toward a sky the color of old tin. Levi Boone had already been up for hours, stoking the fire and mending the fence where the wind had knocked a board loose. He wasn't the kind of man to talk to himself, or even much to his animals. But he had a rhythm to his silence, steady, unhurried, like the creak of old wood. He'd been alone for 9 years. No one had knocked on that door since his wife passed. Folks in town knew better than to call, and he liked it that way. But that morning, just as the wind began to pick up again, and the coffee had gone cold in his tin mug, he heard it. 3 soft knocks. Not hurried, not afraid, just small. When he opened the door, he found a girl no older than 6 standing on his porch, cheeks pink from the cold hair tangled like she'd run through trees. She had one hand on her hip and the other clutching something wrapped in a worn scarf. And she looked him straight in the eyes and said, "My mommy can't walk no more. Please help, Daddy." That last word struck him like a bullet. He wasn't nobody's daddy, not anymore. Not since the snowstorm that took everything. But there was something about the way her lips didn't tremble. Something about how she stood there, not begging, not crying, just asking, like she still believed the world could be kind. And behind her, at the edge of the trees, was a woman, barely upright, leaning against a stump, barefoot and broken. Levi Boone didn't move right away. Sometimes life gives you a choice in silence, no thunder, no signs. Just a moment when your past meets your future, and it's standing on your porch asking for help. He looked at the girl, looked at the woman, and without a word he stepped aside. Wouldn't you like to know what happened next? A man who lost everything, a woman who couldn't walk, and a little girl calling a stranger daddy. Stay with us, because this story doesn't shout, it heals. They crossed the field slow, the little girl tugging gently at Levi Boone's sleeve like she knew the way by heart and didn't want to rush it. He didn't ask where they were going. He just walked, boots brushing frost-bitten grass, the morning wind moving over his shoulders like the hush of a hymn. Past the fence line through the cottonwoods, the girl stopped. "She's right there," she said, and pointed. Beneath the crooked lean of a birch tree lay a woman, one arm curled under her head, the other across her belly. Her dress was the same patch blue as the girl's, her shoes missing, her hair tangled like dry leaves. She didn't move. Levi crouched down. The woman was breathing but shallow. Her skin was pale in the soft light. A half-empty water flask lay beside her and a folded shawl barely covered her legs. He touched her shoulder gently. Her eyes opened, not wide, not startled, just soft, slow recognition and pain. "You're him," she whispered. It wasn't a question. Before he could speak, she winced and looked toward the girl. "I told her not to go." The girl knelt by her quietly and placed a small hand on her cheek. "It's okay, Mommy." He came. Levi's throat caught. The resemblance was clearer now. The cheekbones, the softness around the eyes, like someone drawn from old memory from a time he no longer spoke of. But still, this wasn't Clara. And this child wasn't Rose. Still, the woman looked at him like he had a right to be there. "Who are you?" he asked gently. "My name's Mara," she said, "and this is my daughter, June." Mara tried to sit up and failed. Levi caught her before she slumped. "Don't," he said. "We'll get you warm first. Talk later." And just like that, he was lifting her. She was light, far too light, and the child walked beside them like this was how it was always meant to go. He didn't know why he didn't ask more questions. He just held her careful as he could, brought her back to his home, laid her on the old bed by the stove, the one no one had slept in for over a decade. June curled up on the rug nearby, still silent. Her hands clutched a small carved horse, something homemade. He stirred the fire. Warmth spread. The woman's breathing eased. And in that quiet room, something shifted, not loudly, just enough for a man like Levi Boone to notice. Like a life that had stopped moving, had taken one breath forward. When Mara woke again that night, she looked at Levi and said, "We came here because I remembered your name, from when I was a girl." By morning, the frost had gone from the windows. Levi Boone was already up, splitting kindling behind the cabin, boots crunching over packed earth. He hadn't slept much, not from worry exactly, more from the weight of something beginning again. That bed by the stove hadn't been used since Clara died, and now Mara lay there, curled beneath patchwork quilts, breathing steady. That girl June still hadn't said much, just watched the stove glow through the night like it was telling her stories only she could hear. He brought in water, heated it for tea, sliced bread, fried what was left of the bacon. When Mara stirred, she sat up slow, the blanket falling from one shoulder. Her hair still tangled, eyes still tired. "I didn't mean to come here," she said, voice cracked with sleep. "I thought we'd pass through, but then—" Her voice trailed. Levi nodded. "You're here now." June looked up from the rug where she sat playing with the carved horse again. "Is she gonna stay?" He didn't answer right away, just poured tea into a chipped cup and brought it to Mara. She drank careful quiet. The silence between them wasn't tense. It was the kind of silence folks keep when they're not ready to speak of things yet, and maybe never would. Outside, the wind shifted, the scent of pine and distant wood smoke. Later that day, Levi went to the barn to check the stock. When he came back, he found Mara standing on the porch rail, one hand gripping the post to keep her balance, the other shielding her eyes from the light. "You shouldn't be out here," he said gently. She smiled faint. "I needed to see sky." Her face caught something, a flicker of pain, maybe a memory. Then it passed. "I grew up near Alameda Creek," she said. "I used to ride out at dusk and listen to the wind move through mesquite trees. My mother said if I listened long enough, I'd hear answers. But all I ever heard was loneliness." Levi didn't move, just stood there, one hand on the porch post beside hers. Sometimes, he said, answers come slower than the questions do. They stood there for a long time. No more words. The sound of the wind, the hum of the world moving gently by. That night, as June slept curled by the fire, Mara whispered, not looking at Levi, "There are things I haven't told you yet." And he simply nodded and said, "You don't have to. Not tonight." In the weeks that followed, the snow came in flurries and stayed. The days shortened and the wind grew sharper. But inside Levi Boone's cabin, something softened. Mara was still healing. She limped some, used the wall or Levi's arm for support when she moved. Her voice, once thin with fear, now held weight again, quiet but clear. She'd begun helping where she could, folding quilts, peeling apples, brushing June's hair in the mornings with slow, careful strokes. "I used to do this for her every day," she said once, fingers parting tangles gently. "Then one day I couldn't anymore." Levi didn't ask what had stopped her. He just passed her the comb and sat beside the fire while June hummed to herself. It was never spoken aloud, but slowly the rhythm of three people trying to live together took hold. Mornings with biscuits and eggs, evenings with the same 3 bowls on the table. The cabin had held grief for so long, but now it held warmth again. Not joy yet, but warmth. One night, Mara asked if she could help feed the animals. Levi brought her his old boots and a wool coat that once belonged to Clara. She didn't say a word when she put them on, just pulled the collar high and stepped out into the cold. They moved from stall to stall, Levi carrying the feed, Mara trailing him with slow, uneven steps. "You ever raise animals before?" he asked. "Just chickens. And once a goat that hated me." That made him smile. "A real one, if brief." "You were good with the horses," he said. "I learned to be still," she replied. Later, when they returned to the cabin, June had drawn pictures on the floor with burnt firewood. One looked like a house, another a woman with long hair, and between them a small figure with a circle for a face and 2 dots for eyes. "That's you," she told Levi. He looked at it a long time, kneeling down beside her. "Is that so?" "Yep. Mama said you're the man who lives in the woods and never lets bad things in." He looked at Mara, who looked away. In that silence, he didn't ask what kind of bad things had chased them here. Not yet. But he knew now they weren't just running from hunger. They were running from someone. That night, as the fire burned low and the world outside went quiet, Mara whispered to Levi, almost too soft to hear. "He said if I ever told anyone, he'd come find us. He always does." And Levi, without answering, added another log to the fire and stayed beside her the whole night. There were no more questions after that night. Levi Boone didn't press Mara. He didn't ask about the man she'd run from or what exactly he'd done to her. The look in her eyes, wide, watchful like a deer waiting for the snap of a twig, said enough. He just began locking the doors at sundown. And when June asked why they always bolted the back one now, he told her it kept the wolves out. That seemed to satisfy her. But wolves came in other shapes. One morning, while Mara was combing her daughter's hair, June said quietly, "Mama, I dreamed he was at the window again." Mara froze. Levi from the table looked up. "Which window?" he asked gently. "The kitchen one," June replied. "But he didn't come in. He saw your boots by the door and walked away." That night, Levi moved a chair beside the window and slept there. He kept the shotgun across his lap and the lamp low. The snow kept falling and the wind howled now and then, but nothing else came. Still, Mara couldn't rest. She kept waking to check on June, kept pacing the small room, kept glancing toward the tree line outside. And one evening after Levi had chopped wood until dusk, she brought him a cup of water and finally spoke. "I think he'll come," she said. Levi didn't answer right away. He sat down on the porch steps, looked out over the frozen land. Then he nodded once. "All right," he said. "Let him." Mara stood beside him in the cold. Her hand brushed his sleeve, tentative, not asking him to protect her, just to stay. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I know," he replied, and that was the end of it. They watched the sun vanish behind the ridge, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look afraid of the dark. The next day, June brought out a picture she'd drawn. It was a man standing between a cabin and a shadow. The man had a beard and a big hat, and in crayon letters above him, she had written, "This is the brave man who stands in front of my mama." Levi read it and said nothing. But when he put it on the mantel, he made sure it didn't catch the draft. And later that night, as they sat by the fire with June asleep on the cot, Mara asked quietly, "If he does come, will you still be here?" Levi didn't look at her when he answered, "I haven't left yet." The snow had stopped falling, but the cold had deepened. It was the kind of stillness that made every creak of the floorboard seem louder. Every flicker of the oil lamp cast longer shadows. Levi Boone woke before dawn. He didn't know what had stirred him at first, but the air felt too still, the kind of still that carried warnings in it. He stepped outside, boots crunching softly on the frostbit porch. And then he saw it, a single footprint, not his, not Mara's, too large to be June's. It was down near the slope where the pines thinned, right at the edge of where snow met earth. Levi crouched, studying it. The print was fresh. The snow around it had only just begun to crust over. Someone had been watching, close. When he came back in, Mara had already lit the fire. She was sitting at the table, her hands clasped too tightly around her cup. She hadn't asked, but she already knew. "He's close," she said softly. Levi didn't deny it. He set the shotgun near the door and poured himself coffee. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was something else, steady, ready. That evening, he took June aside and taught her something simple: how to whistle loud and clear. "Like calling a dog," he said, but she understood. They didn't sleep much that night. Levi sat on the porch again, his coat collar high, the fire inside flickering through the window. And just before dawn, he saw movement at the tree line. A man, tall, shoulders hunched, standing too still, not approaching, just watching. And Levi didn't call out. He just stood up, and the man turned and walked back into the woods. Inside, Mara had been watching through the window. Her hand was pressed to the glass. She said nothing. But when Levi came back in, she looked at him like she finally believed it, that not all men leave. Some stand their ground. The next morning, June asked if the wolves were still out there. Levi looked to the tree line and answered quietly, "They came close." Then he added, "But they left." And Mara behind him finally smiled. Spring came late that year. The thaw crept in slowly, melting the edges of the snow one tender patch at a time. Sap began to rise in the trees. Birds returned, not with fanfare, but in small twos and threes, nesting in the eaves of the cabin like they'd always belonged. And inside life found a rhythm. Levi Boone built a second bed frame, not because anyone asked, but because the cot by the fire had become too small for June, who now insisted on tucking a raggedy doll beneath her pillow each night and saying a quiet thank you to it before bed. Mara began moving more, first with a cane, then without. The limp would always be there, but the fear was softening. Her face had changed. The tension in it, the suspicion, the exhaustion, it hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined her. She cooked sometimes, simple cornbread, beans with pepper, on good days even stew. And when Levi came in after chores, boots muddy, face windburned, she would set a bowl down for him before he even asked. Sometimes they talked, more often they didn't, but they began sharing silence like folks share bread quietly, generously, without needing to say what it meant. One morning, June brought a drawing to the table. It was of the cabin, the corral, a pig that looked suspiciously like Levi's old sow, and three figures holding hands. She tapped the tallest one and said, "That's you, Papa." It was the first time she'd called him that. Levi didn't answer right away, just studied the drawing, then her. Finally he said, "Looks like I got long legs." June giggled. Mara looked down and smiled in that way women smile when something sacred has happened, small and quiet, but full of light. That night the fire burned steady. No danger beyond the ridge, no men watching from the tree line. Just a woman with healing eyes, a girl who laughed in her sleep, and a man who never meant to be anyone's hero, but stayed. Sometimes love doesn't come loud. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or grand gestures. Sometimes it knocks softly on your cabin door in the form of a tired child, a broken woman, and a second chance you didn't think you deserved. Levi Boone didn't set out to save anyone, he just left the door open. And maybe that's what healing really is, not fixing what's broken, but standing beside it gently, until it learns to breathe again. In a world that often rushes past quiet stories, this one reminds us to slow down, to listen, and to believe that family doesn't always come from blood, but from who chooses to stay when it's hardest. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, None Wild West Saga, where stories like this are told with warmth, dignity, and just enough dust in the air to make you feel something. We'd love to hear from you. Would you like to see more stories like this? Would you want to know what happens to the little girl to her mother and the quiet man who let them in? Leave a comment below, subscribe. Share this with someone who believes in second chances, because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones we carry the longest.